Good morning, greetings. Thank you for the kind introduction. Thank you, Yoram, for inviting us. President Yaron, it's an honored guest to see some old, renewed guests, and it is really my pleasure to be here. I think forums like this, I was getting some translation to Yoram's comments, and forums like this, I believe, are very critical for thoughtfully and responsibly advancing and looking at and exploring and exploiting the use of technology for education. The discourse that happens, the debates and the arguments are very much part of making sure that we do this in a useful and productive way. I've had about 4 terrific days here in Israel. I have enjoyed the warm hospitality. As Yoram said, I came from cold to colder. I went from Boston to Norway for 2 days to do some presentations and seminars, and came from Norway to Jerusalem and then now to Tel Aviv. I have enjoyed the warm hospitality and the incredible history. And it has been wonderful to engage in the topics that I'm so passionate about, education, innovation, technology, and openness. Last night, some of you might have seen, I had the pleasure of being in a telecast, and I was advancing 3 ideas. I started off by pointing out that there are 3 pretty significant influences that are upon us. Connectivity, and when I said connectivity, I was talking about all things digital, wired, wireless, and the internet, of course, and the web with all its successively improving versions. And so connectivity. The second significant influence is one that I have been working a lot in recent times: openness. And open content, open technology, open knowledge. And the third significant influence, which is to some extent a consequence of the other 2, which in some ways is manifest in this gathering, is what I call collectivity. And when I say collectivity, it implies the community and the increasing focus, engagement of the community in shaping change, in shaping educational change. And today what I'd like to do is sort of build on that, start from there, and present you with some vignettes, some examples of projects and practices and applications, which in themselves, and I'd like to present those and point to what I think is very important, and we forget sometimes, point to their educational intent, the educational motivation that drove those applications, that are driving those applications and those initiatives. Individually, I hope that you will be able to see the educational driver and the educational impact of each of those initiatives. But I believe, and I hope, as you walk with me through this journey looking into the future, you will see that collectively they do point to the potential of some pretty significant transformative impact. So as individual initiatives, and then you look at the whole and say, look, here's the movement. What I hope to do at the end is say, if we can just take yesterday, there was a very provocative question raised about what I think about the future. Those of you who might know something about Americana, there's this crazy statements from this baseball player called Yogi Berra, and his famous line was, "The future ain't what it used to be." And so, we don't know, but I'll try to speculate on some aspects of the future. I did, by way of background, very quickly, all those wonderful things that were said are all very, very complimentary, and I glowed in them. But a couple of things that I like to remember and remind people is that I started off from a background in chemical engineering, went to industrial management, did a lot of techniques for educational planning, but my doctoral work was in educational technology, educational futures, and what we tried to do was see how we can create preferred futures for education. And therefore, the way I look at this whole business of technology's interaction with education is to see how we can not predict, but collectively create preferred futures for education for different contexts. And I hope that through these examples, we'll be able to see some glimpses of that, and then we can collectively participate in its creation. So here is first vignette. This is about a young student in Nigeria who is looking at courses, who's looking at materials that are available openly, and he is using them as supplemental resources. And what it is presenting, as you can imagine, is some choice. It's not that he's not getting materials, although there are, in some cases, that is the case. But what he's getting is a choice. He's able to look at other supplemental materials that might provide him different perspectives on the topic, that gives him an opportunity to approach the subject matter, take a different pathway, and perhaps engage in some deeper learning because of the coverage. This, of course, and I will come to the end of the story where these are some of the advantages of making resources openly available. Now, this is from a learner somewhere out there, and this could be a student in Nigeria, it could be a student down the road from MIT, it could be in Timbuktu, wherever. But suddenly, people have access to resources that can use in supplemental ways and to provide alternative pathways to their education. Here is a different kind of a case where a faculty member, a teacher in Australia, is looking at a course that was developed at MIT and say, here's a lot of complimentary things to say, that it is coherently presented, etc. But here, you're seeing an example where a teacher, or when we are teaching, we might not have to reinvent the course from scratch, or even as we are teaching, we always have room for improvement in our efforts. We can look at benchmarking ourselves against courses that might be created and available elsewhere. So as a teacher learner, there is an opportunity to benchmark, to look at other standards, to look at how one might build on some things that already exist, customize courses, not reinvent the wheel, and use other productions as model. This is a different kind of a story now. Karen Wilcox is a colleague, is a faculty in aeronautics and astronautics at MIT. And what she is saying is, look, let's say I'm teaching fluid mechanics in the third year of a program, and there's a lot of mathematics that students might have learned in the first year. And you know how it is, out of sight, out of mind. And in real time, you really quickly want to do a refresher. You want to say, look, here is that portion of calculus, or the partial differential equations, things that you want to quickly see because they're relevant over here. You can do a quick revision. Because they are openly available, you can quickly go do refreshers. In many cases, this turns out to be very positive. I will tell you an interesting thing. When we launched OpenCourseware, and I was mentioning this the other day, one of the big advantages that we realized for MIT with OpenCourseware was that MIT faculty knew what their colleagues were teaching. Before that, it was publicly available, so we could actually go see what was happening. But it has more profound implications, because if a student comes to me and says, look, I took the following prerequisites, I took the following subjects, I can actually go look at the content of that and see what that student might have gone through, so that it's more than just the name of a course, or in MIT's case, the number of a course. You can actually get to see what is the content. But here is something where, on a just-in-time basis, you can go look at the materials, and that has impact. The flash-forward part of it, and yesterday in the presentation, somebody was pointing out that if I am, and I know this from personal example, because in my second year and my first year when I was doing engineering in India, you're looking at all these triple-order integrals and Green's formula and Stokes formula, and you're saying, why on God's earth am I looking at all this? What is the relevance to real life? And why am I doing this? This is also onerous. And somebody can quickly point to a future course, a future program, and see, look, this is how what you're learning is connected to what is coming downstream. So that's a flash-forward piece. So that's a different kind of vignette when suddenly you're saying, look, you can make things more relevant, even if it is sometimes in a trivial sense or in a superficial way, induce some amount of relevance in the presentation in our education. So that's, and of course, the backdrop over here is these things were enabled by OpenCourseware. Now, you already know about OpenCourseware. Just as a refresher, this was OCW when in 2002, when MIT announced that it was making the content of all its courses available on the web for free to the world for education. Now, OCW started, just to give a very brief historical perspective, it started like everything else in academic institutions starts with a faculty committee and with a council, and the president, Chuck West, whom I'll make a reference to later on, and the provost, really asked us, the council, how can we respond and take advantage of what the internet seems to be offering, what should be our role given the internet. And at that time, many other institutions were trying to look at seeing how they might make their educational materials commercially available, sort of the content.com stuff. And we said that was either not good business or not our business. And we said, why not use the internet, what it can do best, and what we are really here to do, which is to make education and educational resources very, very widely available, spread education, spread good models of education. And of course, there was some other thinking that preceded that, which I'll make a reference to shortly, which was really focusing on what MIT's educational value proposition was. And so MIT decided, in a sense, to take a snapshot of all its courses. I also point out that another side benefit of OCW was because we made the announcement in the course of 2.5 years, we could actually figure out how many courses we actually had. Because when we made the announcement, we just said all the courses, then you saw, and the number is somewhere approximately near 2,000, 1,900 of the courses since that announcement are available on the web. But the clarification that I always have to point out and like to point out that this is a snapshot of all the courses that are available. OCW is a publication event. You look at the courses, they're there in all its richness, but not in their educational richness. Like we say, it is a window to MIT education. It is not MIT education. You do not get a degree for OCW for looking at OCW. So that's an important distinction. So, but it has engendered, it has induced all these other kinds of possibilities that you just saw, which have promise educationally. The fact that students elsewhere can use it for supplements, they can be used as models for course development by faculty elsewhere, at MIT or elsewhere, and for these kinds of relevance kinds of things. OCW was significant in a very interesting way, which is why I think it's a very important why we say it's potentially very, very transformative and impactful, because what it catalyzed very soon was a movement which we are seeing. And that's why I made reference to Open as a significant influence, because what followed suit was a whole bunch of institutions. The consortium that I'm referring to on the screen over there, the consortium boasts 200 institutions, upwards of 200 institutions who are the OCW consortium, and actually it will be what you're not seeing, which has gone over here, and yesterday it was there, it has disappeared in this version, was right there in the corner was the Open University of Israel, which is a member of the consortium. When we loaded the second version of these slides, that went out. Apologize for that. But the fact that a consortium is formed with all these members who are all putting out, all their courses, parts of their courses, and what is interesting, again, is a collective that it has formed which has impact because they're trading ideas. The fact that, the last 2 days, we've been meeting over here, talking about exchanging ideas on how we are publishing OCW, what are the educational possibilities, and the consortium allows that kind of collective action to take place, and trading practices, trading examples, etc. Anyway, so again, although we like to believe that the open movement started with MIT's OCW, we were a catalyst. Open existed before OCW. OCW actually catalyzed a whole open education movement whose implications we are just beginning to see in pretty profound ways. Now, there it is. This was, I feel so much better now. Otherwise, you all will be asking me later on, what happened to the... well, I'm glad it is there, and now you know that I was not lying. This is very important. Any case, so this collective, this consortium with all the courses is indicative of this gathering storm, this very, very potent gathering storm of open education. And one of the things I also point out always is that when I talk about the open influence, it is about more than just the OpenCoursewares in the world. It has a much more generous definition, which includes open tools, open applications, simulations that are openly available, and I expect to show some examples of this. It includes also some legal enablers like Creative Commons, which are making openness much more possible. It includes open architecture and specifications that allow interoperability, that allow portability. That was the focus of the Open Knowledge Initiative, the OKI or OK initiative that was referred to, for which I was a PI. So OERs, the open education resources, are a very inclusive term which include all these dimensions: content, technology, policy enablements, and that's the open movement, I think, which has significant transformative potential. So I said applications, education, and that it is more than just the content of courses. And here is an open example of an application which brings what we think is very important, at least at MIT, hands-on laboratory experience and makes it widely available on the internet. The iLab initiative, and the gentleman you see in the middle is Jesus D'Alamo. He is the creator of the idea, and he had this wonderful line: if you can't come to the lab will come to you. And essentially what iLab does is provide browser-based access to real laboratories. This is not a simulation. So you have network analyzer equipment there at MIT. You have on the side that you see over there is a shake table for seismic measurements in civil engineering. There are labs in chemical. I'm myself a chemical engineer. There are chemical reactors that are available that students in Cambridge are using. So there are 5 or 6 labs that we have set up. And these labs, the architecture that has been set up that is openly available at openilab.mit.edu, it allows students anywhere in Sweden, in Singapore, in India, and Africa to access real laboratories. But again, here, the important story is not that MIT has these 5 or 6 labs that are available over the iLab architecture to students all over the world, but the fact that the architecture is openly available so that all these countries, in fact, these people over here, some of them like Australia and China, have more iLabs than we have at MIT. They have made labs. I mentioned yesterday, I was sitting at a conference at Dalian, China, when this professor of computer science, she comes and she's showing all the iLabs that she has set up. And there was a picture with some of our colleagues. I was telling Professor Dory yesterday from MIT. Steve Lerman, myself, we're all in the picture because she had come, she had seen the labs, she had gone back, she had installed the architecture, and she had set up labs. So you can start imagining the implications of this, because suddenly you have an order of magnitude of more lab experiments. I can have access to labs that I might not have at my place, but be able to see, but my students can access labs that are created elsewhere. And mind you, this is not just about expensive labs. It is about labs anywhere, right? So the goal over here is that you have created an open architecture, you have created the means by which real hands-on experiences can be provided at scale. The larger implication of that is suddenly when you talk about open education, you're not just talking about access to content, but the fact that you can have end-to-end complete portfolio of education experiences. You can have access to content, lectures, you can have chats and communications, etc., but you can also have hands-on experiences, first-hand experiences, which we at least believe are very, very important. There are some other very you know, from an education planner's perspective, there are other deeper implications in terms of the economics of education, of lab experience, and I like to keep pointing this out, that labs are always expensive because the configuration time for labs are always very big, and they're disproportionately big to the amount of usage that they actually get. You have you might have a biology lab or a chemistry setup or a setup like this, or yesterday I was showing something which was a nuclear reactor. The configuration time is very high for the amount of use, right? And this way, you configure it, and you know, through the architecture, you have 24/7 availability to the lab. You have communities all over the world who are students or learners all over the world who can access it. And the side benefit of this in an educational sense is some of these students are forming communities of their own and discussing the labs that are going on, that they are accessing. So you're having learning communities, ad hoc learning communities that are being created, which are working around the labs. So that's a very, very significant advantage. You actually get to see how a student perceives. And you might say that, well, you know, simple harmonic motion is simple harmonic motion. But it's nice to see how other cultures are looking at these experiments. So there is that. So the 24/7, this excessive availability, suddenly you're radically changing the economics of lab instruction. Labs are suddenly, there is another educational point, and I point this out from my own experience, and that's about latency. Typically, we do theory, or we might do a recitation section, and it's 2 weeks later or something that we might do a lab. You know, by the time, and so there is a lot of delay between when you're introduced to a topic and when you do the lab. You know. This, you can reduce the latency. You can actually have in real time, you can be accessing labs. So that's a dimension. Here, somewhere in this. So I gave you these vignettes, and here is where I want to take a moment, pause, and tell you, look, all these were not just a set of random experiments, practices, projects that we launched. You know. There was a lot of educational intent, a lot of thinking that went behind it. We have a Council on Education Technology, and one of the things that we like to point out is a lot of this, and you know, there was a comment made the other day, it's bottom up. It's faculty who are sitting and thinking about what are the important problems that we want to address, what are the experiences that we want to bring to our students. We who are researchers and educators, okay, how do we make sure that our research, that we are able to bring the rigor, in some cases, of research, the excitement of research into educational practice? That is one thing. How do I make sure, like when we talk about iLab, why are we doing iLab? Because we believe that hands-on, first-hand experiences are important, but we also say, well, that should not be not available to people who might be learning at a distance or be in other communities. So there was a lot of educational intent that lay behind many of these projects, and some of the things that I like to point out is when OpenCourseware was launched, for instance, why we took a snapshot and presented because we said, look, we don't know much about distance learning. We don't do. What we know about, our faculty council said, when the president and provost said, what are we going to do about the internet? We all talked and talked, as we all academics do. We talk a lot. And said, you know, in order to answer that question, we should really think very carefully about what is the educational value proposition. What is the quality of educational excellence at MIT? And in typical MIT fashion, a lot was said. They said, oh, it's like drinking from the fire hose. Oh, it's about intensity. And we kept on saying, what does that mean? What does that mean? Till we were able to articulate the fact that the quality of excellence at MIT is derived from a very high bandwidth of interaction between very good students and very good faculty. That is the quality. And then you provide throw a lot of big problems at them to solve. And you do bring a lot of hands-on experiences. So the minute you say that, you're saying, oh, that sounds like residentially based education. That's what we know how to do well, right? It takes a certain amount of humility to say that's what we do well. And we said, okay, here is the internet. The best we can do probably is take a picture of what we do very well and put it out there, and that's OCW. So that's it was a clear articulation of things that matter. So going from there, you said, okay, one of the things we want to do is we want to create innovative learning environments. And you see, if you look at, so OCW, for instance, is around, the theme there was intellectual commons. So we can say we can take pictures of our courses, publish our courses, and put it out there, and share this resource widely in the world. But we said, okay, if the high bandwidth of interaction between students and faculty is important, what do we do about these very large lectures, where there are 400 students in an introductory physics class? What kind of interaction can you have there? So we said technology should be used to make sure that we can either amplify our value, extend it to communities that we don't normally serve, or address barriers that exist in us realizing our value. So large lectures present a barrier in realizing our value of intimate education. So we said, let's take this large physics course, and Professor Dory was here somewhere, and she actually worked on this project with John Belcher, who was the gentleman in the middle. And they said, let's take all these physics courses and break them up into studio-based physics exercises, where they're doing hands-on stuff, where they're interacting. And so we said, let's bring technology to make sure that we take large lectures and convert them into small group interactive exercises. So that's the strategic intent over there. That's the educational intent that lies behind that use. So there are other projects like that, collaborative projects for design. This is a mechanical engineering course where students collaborate with tablet PCs. They share designs amongst each other and end up producing robots where there's a robot competition. So the idea is to provide a methodology and supporting software that can improve the teaching of design, and then we can share this widely at other universities. Here is a very important thing. I talked about the fact that as faculty, you worry about how can I bring the intensity of research, the rigor, the excitement of research into, let's say, undergraduate education, freshman education. This is an area, a very important theme, I will call it a strategic area, that my office, the Office of Educational Innovation and Technology, works on, which is to bridge research and learning. It's all very nice to say that research and teaching will be very, very proximal, but you have to create some tangible connections. Sometimes we do that programmatically. There is an excellent program called UROP at MIT, which is a flagship program called the Undergraduate Research Opportunities Program. 86% of MIT undergraduates engage in UROP, so they can publish papers with their faculty. They do actual research. So that's a programmatic way of doing it. Here is a technological way, and I think in the interest of time, rather than explain, Star Biochem, for instance, the goal of the project, like I said, is bringing research tools into the classroom. Our faculty want to bring the richness of the tools that are used in research. But what happens is there is often a very, very steep learning curve. There must be so much scripting, technology, programming to do in order to get to that. And what we have done is work to reduce the operational fog, as I say, so that you can actually have our students, freshman students, can have access to very powerful visualization tools. They can control these tools. There are lots of very complex visualization tools. We simplify it for them so that they can, the Star Biochem, for instance, students in undergraduate biology courses. I'll tell you what, let me take a minute over here. This is an informal, I'll bring some informality. And rather than me talk about it, I will have a very quick...
Star Biochem user interface visually represents protein structural information based on the 4 levels of protein structure. For example, we can select quaternary and click on chain to better differentiate the human DNA repair protein and the segment of DNA to which is bound. All helices, sheets, and coils within this protein can be visually represented by clicking on all ribbons within the secondary window. To visualize only one of these structures, one can click on track selection and the particular structure of interest. Let's take a closer look at helix 16. First, let's visualize the atoms present within this structure. Second, let's highlight only 16 by obscuring the rest of the protein. To see only the side chains of the amino acids within this helix, move the backbone slider to the left. To highlight only the backbone of the helix, repeat the step within the side chain slider. Now let's explore how this protein interacts with the substrate. To do this, first, let's select a DNA substrate within PBD tree. Second, we will obscure the protein to highlight the selected DNA substrate by moving the unselected scroll bar to the left until the protein is partially transparent. Now we can see how this protein flips out a DNA base from the double helix to check for mutations as it travels along the DNA.
Anyway, so you're able to see, so what you saw was how we are bringing some of these research, and we have created tools. And by the way, all these simulations, visualizations from the STAR program are available at star.mit.edu openly. And what we put it out there because, and we have created, the voice that you heard is Dr. Lourdes, who's a postdoc working in my office, who has been working on creating educational materials around these visualizations. And now this has become part of all the intro biology courses. They're available online and openly so that you can go and create your own local educational materials around that. That's the magic, that you can localize it, and at the same time you're trying to bring some very, very powerful research experiences. And it always starts by going and asking faculty, what is the experience that you'd like to bring? And this is in hydrology, in GIS, etc. There are some very interesting applications. One of the things that is over there at the bottom is a female astronaut who is out there doing extravehicular activity. And this is a visualization that has been created. And so in microgravity, she's trying to balance herself. And the thing is that it is based on PhD work that is going on. And this is an undergraduate project management course. But students are also being used to concept of angular momentum. How do you conserve angular momentum in zero gravity or in microgravity? So these are the kinds of things you introduce to simulations, powerful concepts, you introduce them to research work, at the same time some very, very core educational concepts. The second area, which is particularly important in today's world with all this abundance of resources around us, is how do you productively harvest useful content from proprietary or open resources, bring them together and combine them into educational experiences. How do you build narratives around visual materials? More and more data are visual in nature, images of machine components, movie clips of vibration, crystalline structures, Shakespeare plays. There's a whole bunch of images of different civilizations and culture. How do you bring them together in order to have deeper learning? And in fact, this is a very interesting, I understand that Professor Shigeru Miyagawa was here a few years ago, and this is a wonderful project called Visualizing Cultures that is built on OKI's specifications. And John Dower, and what it does is it gets images that have been so far closed, whether they are inaccessible, whether they are in the Museum of Fine Arts or in the Hiroshima Museum, and create a collection, a well-connected collection, so that students can see history through images. And some of these images once had wide circulation, but now they're in different repositories. They are technologically trapped. They are procedurally trapped. And the idea is, again, to bring a view to culture and language learning through images by making them, by making it very easy to combine, to bring them together, to harvest them, to collectively, to creatively combine them. This is a very interesting project that I did want to talk to you about, which has remarkable possibilities. And this is the gentleman that you see, and this is also linking content and curriculum. How do you go get chunks of content that might exist, let's say, in video lectures, okay, so that I can go revise particular segments, so that I can take it and use it in different course. What you're seeing is Professor Walter Lewin, who is a dramatic physics teacher. Okay, he does introductory physics courses. If you go to the OCW site, you will see Professor Lewin, and I say dramatic because he will be dancing on the ceiling. He'll be hanging and swinging to show simple harmonic motion. So he'll be doing a lot. And one of the things that we have created is technologies based on research that is done in our computer science program. Professor Jim Glass has developed tools for automatic speech recognition and language processing so that you can go and search extended video to pick out particular segments. So if you have 21 hours of Walter Lewin's introductory physics lecture, I can go and I, as a student, look at it and I want to go revise portions, those portions of the lecture that are talking about angular momentum, okay? I can go, so what the technology does is automatically use the audio transcription to provide the text, so it generates automatically the transcriptions, and then you can do searches on this so that if I want to go find all the segments that have to deal with angular momentum, I can quickly go and find those video segments. I can revise it. If I'm an instructor in mechanical engineering who wants to teach about angular momentum, I can say, look, Walter does a good job of it. I'll point them to that segment. But I, as an instructor, might say, Walter does a great job, but I want to tune it to my teaching. We allow the capability to massage the metadata itself so that I can fit it into my course. You know. And this, I point this as a very interesting thing that we have done in India with this, and I'll quickly touch on that because it will point to the possibilities. What we did, and again, I hope I can. Well, I'll get back to it. What we did here was really take this transcription and I'm working with this very exciting initiative called the Indian Institute for Human Settlements, which is a collaboration between MIT School of Architecture Planning, my office, this Indian Institute, and they have a lot of video clips. So we have used Jim Glass's technology to go to automatically transcribe these clips, and as you can see, immediately translate them into multiple Indian languages because inclusiveness and scale for different languages matter so that different audiences can come to it. So you are seeing some of these kinds of possibilities, and there are other technologies that we have used, such as concept mapping tools to create courses from different repositories where you try to pull on information from different repositories, create a concept mapping tool, go search the internet, select useful resources, find resources, and try to create, and then even use recommendations. What you see on the blog over there is recommendations from others on related resources and bring it together in useful ways so that people can create courses. So in the interest of time, I'm going to rush through and just come straight to think about you're sort of seeing the possibilities. There are 3 points that I hope I have been able to make clear over here. Suddenly you have access, but in a vectorial sense. Access not just in terms of looking at all kinds of resources, but actually access in a way with direction, where there are alternate pathways to learning, where actually I can engage with the materials to create different kinds of educational experiences, where I can, as in the case of iLab, blend the physical with the virtual. Where there is an opportunity for continuous improvement through the feedback of the community. And most importantly, because these are sort of openly available, there is opportunity for continuous learning. You know, I do not have to limit my education to a 4-year process. I can think about 2 years, I can think about 100 years. You know. So suddenly lifelong learning takes on new meaning. So here it is. Yesterday, last night, in closing, I was asked, where are we going with this? What is the future? So again, I said, listen, we don't predict the future. We try to engage in creating it. We try to invent it. So some of the directions that we see, from just visible resources to usable resources, from just situated learning to sort of anywhere, virtual, blended learning, from just being passive observers, receiving knowing, to actually going and acting as communities, affecting it, from being an enrolled limited term student to being a registered lifelong member of an institution. I can pop in and pop out when I want. I can get different certifications. What it means also for those of us who think a lot about distance education, it really upscales distance education from how it was perceived traditionally as a second-class citizen, to network-enabled open education, where you say that, look, this is a central modality for delivering quality education. And in fact, everyone should be doing this, not just the folks who are remotely available. And then what it does, and this is in the quality of all openness, I'm borrowing from a great visionary, my ex-president, Chuck West. It really allows us to go from the notion of a university, as we think about it, to a metaversity. And this is what Chuck had said when he was interviewed by Edicon about what he saw as a vision. And he said, look, we are seeing the early emergence of a meta-university, a transcendent, accessible, empowering, dynamic, communally constructed framework of open materials and platforms on which much of higher education worldwide can be constructed or enhanced. I think I will borrow and share that vision with Chuck. Thank you.